There are moments in a person's life when they stand at a crossroads and every voice around them says turn back, go the safe way, choose the easier path, and then every once in a while someone refuses to listen. Someone walks straight into the storm, arms open, heart wide, and chooses love anyway. This is the story of one of those people. And the little boy who changed everything he thought he knew about family. The year was 1977. Bruce Rosen was 31 years old, living in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. He worked as a middle school gym teacher, coached after-school basketball on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and spent his weekends fixing things around the building in exchange for a small rent reduction. He wasn't rich. He wasn't connected. He was a quiet, steady man who believed deeply and without apology that a person's worth had nothing to do with what they could produce or perform. He'd grown up watching his mother care for his Uncle Harold, who had cerebral palsy, watching her tie his shoes and cut his food and talk to him like he was the most interesting person in the room, because to her he was. Something in that childhood had shaped Bruce in ways he was still discovering. Bruce had never married. He'd come close once in his late 20s, but it hadn't worked out and he'd made peace with that. What he had not made peace with was the feeling quiet but persistent that his home was too empty, that he had more to give than he was being asked to give. He'd lie awake some nights listening to the radiator knock and the traffic outside, and feel the particular loneliness of someone who has a lot of room in their heart and nowhere to put it. He wasn't sure exactly when the idea of adoption first formed. He'd read a short article in the Columbus Dispatch about the state's foster care backlog. Thousands of children waiting, not infants, older kids, kids with medical needs, kids that the system quietly acknowledged were harder to place. Bruce had clipped that article and kept it in the junk drawer by his kitchen sink for 3 months before he finally called. That first phone call led to a caseworker named Diane, and Diane, after several home visits and long conversations and one afternoon where she sat at his kitchen table and asked him harder questions than he expected, told Bruce about a 4-year-old boy named Milton. Milton had been born in the spring of 1973 to a young couple in rural southern Ohio. He came into the world with an extra chromosome, a condition known as Down syndrome. His parents, barely in their 20s, overwhelmed and given very little guidance, had made the agonizing decision to place him in the care of the state when he was barely 18 months old. At that time, in that era, this was not uncommon. Doctors routinely told families of children with Down syndrome to institutionalize them, to move on to have another child. The language used was clinical and cold, and it left parents feeling that loving their child and keeping their child were somehow incompatible. Two things that could not exist in the same house. It was a system built on the assumption that certain lives were too difficult to be worth living fully. That assumption was wrong, but in 1977, almost nobody said so out loud. Milton had spent 2.5 years in a group facility outside of Chillicothe. The staff were not unkind, but they were stretched thin, and individual attention was a luxury that rarely came. He slept in a room with 7 other children. He ate at a long table with plastic chairs. He learned, slowly and out of necessity, to make himself small and quiet when things felt uncertain, which was most of the time. When Bruce first met him, Milton was sitting in a plastic chair in a pale green hallway, wearing a striped shirt that was slightly too big and holding a small toy car with both hands like it was something precious. Bruce sat down in the chair next to him and said hello. Milton didn't look up right away. Then slowly, he held the car out, offering it, not giving it as if to say, look at this, look what I have. And Bruce looked. He said it was a very good car, and Milton, for the first time in that visit, smiled. Bruce drove home 2 hours later and called Diane and told her he wanted to move forward. What followed was not easy. The adoption process for a single man in 1977 was already unusual enough to raise eyebrows. Adding a child with Down syndrome raised everything else. The social worker assigned to his case reviewed his file 3 times. His neighbors talked, his mother called, worried, asking if he had really thought this through. A colleague at school said, gently but clearly, that he admired the intention but wondered if Bruce understood what he was taking on. What they all meant, what no one quite said, was that this was not what people did. Bruce understood. He did it anyway. Milton came home on a Thursday in October. He carried everything he owned in a canvas bag. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, 1 book with the cover torn halfway off, and the toy car. Bruce had set up the second bedroom with a real bed, a dresser painted yellow because someone had told him yellow was a cheerful color, and a set of wooden blocks stacked in the corner. Milton walked in, looked around, and immediately went to the blocks and knocked them over. Then he looked at Bruce to see if he'd get in trouble. Bruce laughed. He picked up a block and handed it back. They stacked them together. The early years asked a great deal of Bruce. Milton had speech delays and needed weekly therapy. He had a heart condition that required monitoring. He was slow to trust, prone to sudden loud moments in grocery stores or unfamiliar places, and deeply, stubbornly particular about the order of his morning routine socks before shoes. Always, without exception. And if you forgot, you would know about it. Bruce learned all of it. He learned which foods Milton would and wouldn't eat. He learned that Milton calmed down fastest when someone hummed, not spoke. He learned that Milton's laugh, a full body, totally unguarded laugh, was the best sound in any room it ever entered. He also learned something about himself. That patience wasn't just something you practiced, it was something that grew. And the more it grew, the more it changed the shape of everything around it. Milton started school at a public elementary program for children with developmental disabilities. He loved art. He could spend an hour with a box of crayons and a piece of paper layering colors until the page looked like something alive. His teachers said he had an eye for it. Bruce framed every drawing and hung them in the hallway, one after another, until the whole wall was Milton's. Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, their life found its rhythm. Milton learned to ride an adapted bike. He got a job at 22, bagging groceries at a local market 3 days a week, and he took it seriously, showed up on time, wore his apron straight, remembered the names of the regular customers. Bruce went to every Special Olympics event, standing at the edge of the track with his hands in his pockets and his eyes bright, cheering with everything he had. They fought sometimes. Milton had a stubborn streak, and so did Bruce, and some Sunday afternoons ended with both of them in separate rooms and the television too loud. But it never lasted. It never could. There was too much between them, too many Thursday dinners and long drives and quiet evenings watching old westerns for any argument to hold. Now, it is 2026. Milton is 53 years old. Bruce is 80. They still live together in a small house in the same Columbus neighborhood where they planted themselves decades ago. Bruce moves a little slower these days, and Milton's hair has gone fully gray, which he is very proud of. He mentions it often. He'll catch his reflection in a window or a mirror and say in that particular voice of his, "There I am." There are home health aides now, 2 days a week, and a network of people who check in, a neighbor who brings soup, a former student of Bruce's who mows the lawn, a social worker named Carla who calls every Friday. The world that once looked at them with confusion or pity has mostly slowly come around, or maybe they just stopped noticing. Either way, what exists between them needs no approval. What Bruce chose in 1977 in a pale green hallway, next to a boy holding a toy car, like it was the most valuable thing in his small world, it was not charity. It was not sacrifice in the way people mean when they say the word with reverence. It was something harder to name and far more durable than either of those things. It was the decision to look at another human being and say, clearly and without reservation, you matter, you belong somewhere, you belong here with me. And Milton, in return, gave everything and more. He gave Bruce laughter and loyalty, and the kind of education that can only come from loving someone without conditions and being loved the same way back. He gave him a life that was full in all the ways that actually count. Some people spend their whole lives searching for a love that never asks them to be anything other than exactly who they are. Bruce Rosen found his on a gray Thursday morning in October, sitting on the floor of a yellow dresser bedroom, stacking wooden blocks with a little boy who had already waited long enough. And he never once looked back.